Hi everyone, if you can hear me, please indicate in the comment section. Okay, so hello everyone. Good afternoon. You already know me for some of you that have been attending this session. For new attendees, um, my name is Pascal, and I'm the program manager here at Inspire Incubator Hub, part of the Abuja Technology Village. So good to have you guys here. I believe that a good number of us here are startups and possibly have um, projects around renewable energy and the like. So if you are coming in, the speakers would like to meet you. Just tell us your name, your startup name, and your location. Okay, so we have Maurice from Zambia. Yes, Maurice, this is for everyone. It's not just for Nigerians. As you can see, even our speakers are not Nigerians. This is open to everyone, whether you are in Nigeria. We have startups, our startups in Nigeria. Some of them are from Zambia, some of them Ghana, South Africa, and the like. So you are very welcome. So, Maurice, can we meet you? Other people in the session, just tell us your name, your location, your startup name, so that we begin immediately. Okay, so while we are waiting for you, we have to quickly introduce our distinguished speakers who are seasoned professionals in the um, renewable energy industry. So with us today, we have Mr. Enrique Sira Martinez. Hope I got the pronunciation well. Enrique.
Say it again.
How you pronounce your name,
Enrique
Enrique?
Yes,
Martinez.
you pronounce it fine. It's perfectly well pronounced.
Okay. Okay, so Mr. Enrique is a seasoned oil and gas power executive with over 20 years experience globally. He's a highly driven leader with strong commitment to growth and with track record of consistently delivering results. Um, he has worked in numerous sectors and have strategic industry knowledge as a distinct advantage. He's presently the CEO of Upside Value Group. Good to have you here, Mr. Enrique.
Thanks for having me. Thank you.
Okay, so the next guest we have here is Mr. Hector Moran. Okay, so Hector Moran is a senior portfolio manager with over 20 years of experience in sustainable finance and global capital markets, with experience that traverses numerous industries, including deep expertise in renewable energies and the telecom space. A market analyst, international deal strategist, and savvy negotiator, he has built a portfolio of listed companies valued at more than 800 million euros. He was previously a senior portfolio manager at Criteria Kaiser, an investment holding company with a 23 billion euros portfolio. He has a master of he holds a master of business administration from ISED in Spain, including the including the completion of a 6-month exchange program in Germany at the WHU. Good to have you here, Mr. Hector Moran.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, so the last guest we have here is Alfredo Betancourt, with over 2 decades of experience in the renewable energy and sustainable infrastructure sectors. Alfredo has held pivotal roles in various multinational corporations and consulting firms, contributing significantly to business development, project management, and strategic planning. He's a partner at eFuels Solution and a member of the management board. His prior experiences include Mexico country manager for Trina Solar, where he focused in the development, financing, construction of photovoltaic projects, and he was also the country manager for AO Electric Mexico. Good to have you here once again, Mr. Alfredo Betancourt.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so every other person, please, if you are just coming in, please tell us your name, your startup name, and your location. I can see a lot of people in the room, so we're waiting for you to tell us your name. So, we'll hand over the studio to our guest for today. So, I think Mr. Hector will go first.
Yes, sure.
Okay, so you have the
First,
floor, sir.
thank you. First of all, we would like to thank the opportunity to talk with you and the invitation and on behalf of Upside. It's an honor to our side to share our experience and our initiatives with your audience. We would like to split the presentation in 3 parts. I will start with a general overview of the energy sector, the renewable energy sector, with some figures in Europe, in Africa, the great opportunity that we perceive in Africa because of the potential in growth, in population growth, economic growth. And thereafter, Enrique will try to give us a parallelism between Brazil and Africa, because he started a renewable energy company in Brazil 10 years ago, when the renewable energy sector in Africa, in Brazil, was very nascent, and he will try to elaborate or to give us a parallelism and the opportunities that he found 10 years ago. And finally, Alfredo will talk about the energy storage, and also he will give us some overview about distributed energy, which is the basically solar energy installed in the roof of houses or factories or buildings that could be used for self-consumption. But we bear in mind that the main focus of this presentation today is opportunities with multilateral organizations, multilateral organisms, and we will try to offer you our help, our advice to start in these kind of initiatives. And Alfredo is a former member of the North American Development Bank, which is a multilateral organization, and he was very active in the finance of renewable energy projects. So we will try to finalize and to end up the presentation giving you opportunity, giving you our view of opportunities with these multilateral organizations. As I said at the beginning, we perceive a great opportunity in Africa. Africa is a nascent continent in terms of economic growth, population growth, and clearly that represents an opportunity for the energy sector. There's going to be a huge increase in energy demand in Africa in the coming years and decades because of the population growth. Africa has one of the fastest growing populations globally, and that increased the necessity of energy in the future. The economic development, if we look at the GDP growth in Africa, is the fastest at global level, and that implies also an increase in energy consumption. Urbanization trend is another factor that will trigger or will increase the demand of energy. Africa will experience for sure in the coming years and decades an transurbanization process that will increase the consumption of energy, technological advancements, as could be the case of energy, renewable energy technologies, wind energy, not just solar energy and wind energy. Energy access, I think the development of the grid in Africa is also a pending point that is going to help to the development of energy. Also is very important. Energy policies, we know that, for instance, in the case of Nigeria, the government is promoting a very pro-energy development policies in order to promote the development of renewable energy, and that for sure is not just the case of Nigeria. There are some other countries, as could be the case of Kenya, which we know that is very active in the renewable energy arena, and also South Africa. So all the energy policies deployed by different governments and different institutions will help to the development of energy. International investment is another issue. We presume that in the coming years, as happens in Latin America, that Enrique could give us some feedback. The same will happen in Africa. International investors will arrive to Africa to develop renewable energy, and that could represent an opportunity. But also there are some challenges in Africa, as could be the case of the necessity of developing adequate infrastructure, adequate policies, and also regional variations or regular inequalities. There are huge differences among the countries in Africa. For instance, on the top of the economic development, we have South Africa and Nigeria, but also there are some other countries with different levels of development that for sure could represent a challenge, but also at the same time an opportunity to develop energy. Just to give you some general figures or global figures to identify or to perceive the opportunities, bear in mind that, for instance, in Europe, there are a common strategy that is well known as the 30-30 agenda, which means that in the year 2030, Europe should produce 30% of its energy from renewable energy sources in order to reduce the pollution and as part of the decarbonization policies promoted at European level. Nowadays, as far as I know, in the case of Africa, 9% of the energy is produced from renewable energy, which is a good starting point, but also that tells us that it's an important opportunity, a great opportunity in the case of Africa. For instance, in Spain, there are 70.5 gigawatts of renewable energy installed, which is more or less the total capacity installed in the whole continent in Africa. And that, again, gives us a clear overview of what is the opportunity in Africa. In Europe, there are countries with a very strong or very aggressive policies in terms of renewable energy. For instance, Germany, which developed a very aggressive solar projects, very aggressive solar projects development, which installed nowadays German accounts or has 50 gigawatts of solar projects, followed by Italy with 20, Spain 14. Spain is very strong in the wind energy arena, more than the solar energy because of the weather conditions. And just with these global figures, we know that the hydro projects in Africa are the hydroelectric projects in Europe has a strong presence, especially in the case of Nigeria. There are very big dams or hydroelectric projects, like in the case of the Kenji Dam, the Java Dam, and the Shiroro Dam in Nigeria are clear examples of the hydropower, which you have the Niger River and the Benue River in Nigeria that could help to the development of the hydro energy. With this global overview, and especially bearing in mind the opportunities that Africa represents for the development of renewable energy, I pass to Enrique to hear from Enrique the experience and he could elaborate the parallelisms between Africa nowadays and Brazil 10 or 15 years ago. Enrique,
Thank you, Hector. Yes, so I think trying to put in perspective the history of our company, which is a young company. I founded the company 10 years ago. but it could be it could offer a useful perspective for you all that are entrepreneurs and are thinking about developing new companies, creating new companies, developing new products, and also thinking about the energy space. So the company today, 10 years after its foundation, we have a 5 gigawatt portfolio in Brazil. We have more than 300 megawatts in Colombia. And now we are starting to open positions in the European continent. So we open a subsidiary in Spain, and gradually we've been evaluating projects in Portugal, in Spain, and Italy. And we hope that throughout this year and the next, we are able to build a portfolio and bring that portfolio into production. So that's where we stand today, 10 years after. But when we founded the company, I was living in Brazil. And Brazil really was a country with very little hydrocarbon production. Brazil had no gas until the Bolivian pipeline was built. So all the gas that entered Brazil at that time was gas coming from Bolivia. Brazil also had very little hydrocarbon production, very little fossil fuel production in the northeastern of the country, clearly not enough to supply the energy needs of the country. So Brazil historically has always been a net importer of hydrocarbons. When we founded the company, solar was very incipient. It was the beginning of the solar industry in Brazil. It's developed very, very fast. It's today is the third largest source of generation in the country, and it's growing very, very rapidly and continues to do so. Brazil depended almost entirely in hydro and biofuels, not by conviction, but by necessity, because there was no other option. So it's a country with very significant hydro infrastructure, and that was developed since the beginning. That's where the bulk of the electricity in Brazil comes from. By the way, Brazil is the largest electricity market by far in Latin America. So it's 170 gigawatts of installed capacity. It's probably slightly bigger now. At that time, it was probably 145 gigawatts of capacity, and with very little, almost zero participation in solar. So we developed our first projects in this context, and it was extremely challenging. Not only because, for example, environmental agencies are not fully used to regulating and approving and issuing permits for solar source, not yet. It was very difficult also to sign PPAs, to get someone that will buy your energy, because the solar generation profile is different, because they didn't have the reassurance on the technology, and also very difficult to finance. Brazil is already, and to some extent continues to be, a relatively closed market when it comes to finance. It's very difficult to get funds from outside Brazil to finance an investment. So most people rely on the Brazilian banks and the Brazilian Development Bank, which is BNDES. And when solar was at the beginning, it was also very difficult. The banks tend to be more conservative, and the requirements they put on a project are normally very demanding, so that they get the necessary assurance in order to lend the money. The Development Bank, however, had an incentive since the beginning in which they would lend you money at a lower rate. It was relatively cheaper than other sources of financing in Brazil. But let's say it didn't mean it was easy. It was very, very challenging. So it took a lot of work to do the first, the second, the third project. And of course, the industry learned how to develop solar in Brazil very, very fast, very quickly. There were some developers that had already done a significant amount of wind in Brazil, which, by the way, has a very significant wind potential as well. And these developers, they found the transition to solar to be a lot easier. We started from zero, and it was a significant task of endurance and energy and persistence. Today, we obviously, once you manage to get to a certain size, you want to diversify, because having everything in a single market, even if it is the largest market in Latin America, it's important to be able to diversify your growth. And that's how we got into Colombia, not very different from Brazil. I would say, looking at hindsight, the Colombian market, in order to develop solar, has all the challenges that the Brazilian market has without the large scale. Because Brazil, it's a very large market. If you're bidding because you need a trafo, or you need the panels for your solar facility, inverters, etc., there's a market which is very fluid and is very large. So prices tend to be more competitive. You go to Colombia, which is a smaller country, you don't get that advantage. There's some large players that make it difficult for smaller players to move forward and advance. But nonetheless, when the rules are relatively clear, and the regulators understand their role and how important it is to foster the development of renewables, things tend to happen. The right laws tend to be approved, the right incentive tend to be put in place. And that's how we have managed also in Colombia to develop a pipeline that, for the size of the Colombian market, I would say it's a good size pipeline. We have north of 300 megawatts in about 6 projects. So that is, we're satisfied with the position that we have in Colombia. We only need now, obviously, which is easily said but not easily done, is build these projects and bring them to production. And then now we are in the last step, not the last, I hope, but it's the next step, which is growing in Europe. And that, of course, presents other challenges. The European market, especially the Spanish market, are very, very mature, very competitive. Prices tend to be very low because there's a lot of solar production. New technologies are adopted extremely fast. Batteries, we see that today. Everybody's adopting batteries, even if they don't know exactly what the regulation that will come in a few months, we hope, will say. But everybody understands that this is a necessity of the market, and everybody, or a significant share of the new projects, are coming with batteries. So you have to be able to assume those risks and implement them in the best way possible. But on the side of financing, on the side of sourcing equipment, when it comes to for example, checking whether the land is suitable or not, the property of the land is clean, nothing is being, let's say, alienated, so that you can actually finance the project later on, etc. Those things work very well, very fast, a lot better than in Latin America when you are in a European market. So that is, when we don't plan to stop here. We plan to continue to adopt new technologies. We're making an effort to bring batteries into our new projects, and we are making an effort in order to continue to expand into other markets. So always we enter a new market with a local partner who knows very well what we're getting into. And that is a point that I would like to highlight. Since the beginning, all the partners in Upside Value And all the people we have hired are people highly experienced with good knowledge of the industry. And I believe to a very large degree, this has been a differentiating factor that has allowed us to get to the point where we are today. It's also very, very important. So you need good people in addition to everything else that we've been discussing here. So our next steps obviously include growing into other latitudes and other markets. We don't rule out Africa. At some point, we evaluated some project opportunities in Tanzania. But we continue to be interested, and not only in Africa, but Southeast Asia, the rest of Europe, North America, where we have had that in our goals for a long time, but so far a good opportunity, good safe opportunity has not appeared, but we continue to work on it. So that is more or less the perspective that we have today. That is the background. That is where we come from, and I truly hope is helpful for you guys, who, especially those of you who have in mind building a new company or in the energy space. Thank you very much. So I guess, Alfredo, if I leave it with you, if you can talk about batteries and other new technologies and financing. Thank you so much.
Of course. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for inviting me to this webinar. Quite interesting. Really glad to be here with you. And I will talk a little bit about the opportunities in the renewable sector. I know that this webinar is aimed at startups interested in the energy sector. So I will speak about these opportunities and also about the financing opportunities by multilateral entities. So also let me tell you that the renewable energy sector has grown a lot in the last 15 years. There's a huge opportunities in different areas. Of course, the area that is growing the most is the distributed generation or energy decentralization, as we tend to call it. We have seen that the market is changing from the typical consumer of energy to this new concept called prosumer, where the consumer of energy is also the producer of the energy, on-site generation. This, of course, brings a lot of benefits to the user, and not just to the user, but also to the grid operator and to the government entities that invest in the energy sector, mainly to reduce the transmission and distribution costs, infrastructure costs, cost reductions to the end user, of course. Very important, and I think that it's one of the focus points of many of the off-takers or users is a long-term energy cost certainty. With energy coming from fossil fuels, you are the prices can vary along in the long term depending on the fuel costs, the transmission, etc. And with energy, distributed energy, those the costs are more certain, the prices won't vary as much, and it's one of the great benefits. Of course, another important benefit that nowadays is getting a lot of attention is the reduced in emissions. So it's just for the supply side, for the energy supply side. Then the next step of what we have been seeing as the next important step in the renewable energy integration is energy storage. Energy storage, batteries, there are a lot of alternatives beyond batteries. Of course, the most practical and advanced at this time are batteries based on lithium-ion cells. And they bring a lot of benefits. Some people tend to believe that it's just for support, like a UPS, but it's much more than that. No? We have peak shaving schemes where the cost of electricity varies along the day, very low prices, even in some places, negative prices of energy when there's a lot of energy offer and not much demand. And then very huge difference in prices, very high prices at maximum demand time. And the batteries, the energy storage, can help to reduce the gap. Charging the batteries at low prices and discharging at high prices for internal consumption, or even for selling the energy in the spot market. So this brings a huge opportunity. Linked to the renewable energy generation to on-site generation, the next step, battery storage. Also, the battery storage is a great way to introduce renewables into the grid. I tend to renewables are mostly considered as intermittent sources. I prefer to say variable sources, not intermittent. At the end, it's almost the same. But the generation, this variable generation has a great impact on the grid, on the operation of the grid. So having an energy storage system help to reduce those impacts, make the operation of the grid easier for the grid operator, and in some cases where these differences has a price or a penalty, with energy storage, these penalties are reduced, so the projects tend to be much more, the returns of the project tend to be much more attractive. Also, the energy storage or the batteries are a great way to improve the energy quality, to electricity quality to the users. The energy going into the system and the system being able to regulate voltage and frequency will increase the energy quality, reduce the impact of these variables into the systems or equipments, and this also has a great benefit in cost. And of course, the energy reliability, the batteries tend to work as a support system. Now, we have the renewable energy generation, we have the energy storage, and then what also brings a great opportunity is the next, or something to group these things, and that's the microgrid. Microgrid will help or help to match the demand with the supply, with the energy supply, and the net result is a reduced cost or reduced emissions. So what these systems do is choose between which is the best energy source at a specific time in the day. It comes from solar, grid, or the stored energy in the battery systems. The microgrid will choose which is the best combination or the best source for each specific time, depending on the energy demand, and this makes the system much more efficient. So it's a very good opportunity also in the renewable energy sector, something that's growing a lot. And of course, everything, all these phases, these three phases, on-site generation, storage, microgrid, have a big impact on emissions. So the decarbonization schemes or the decarbonization goals will be met with these systems. Now, these are the technical opportunities. What can companies like yours, startups in the energy sector, can do? But now comes the most difficult part, and it's how to finance, how to develop the project. First, there are different schemes that you know, from capex schemes where the end user makes the investment, and a developer designs, develops the project, constructs, builds the project. The next alternative for energy supply is PPAs, power purchase agreements, where the end user or the consumer does not have to make any investment, just a long-term commitment to pay for the energy generated under a take or pay scheme. That means that all the energy generated will have to be paid by the end user. And then the next alternative, it's a much bigger or alternative that covers much more, is the as a service scheme, the energy as a service that it's not just for energy supply, but can be storage, microgrid, a different combination where everything, all the system is as a service scheme, similar to a PPA, but covering much more than just energy supply. So it can be, of course, the storage, the operation of a grid, of a microgrid, and it can be linked to the performance of the system, like a performance contract, where the payments goes depending on the performance of the installation, mainly to reduce costs. Can be under cost savings or a cost sharing shared savings contract, etc. So this is the next step where it covers much more than just a PPA. So we have the technology, we have the systems, we have the different schemes. Now, how to finance all these? Of course, as Enrique was saying, development banks are good alternatives, but many times the country development banks are most focused on different kind of projects, infrastructure for the day-to-day, and these schemes, these alternatives are not their core business. So here comes the multilateral agencies or banks. But, the first example that comes to mind is the World Bank or the IFC, the International Finance Corporation. And these entities are able not just to finance this type of project, but also they have grants that could be used depending on, of course, on what the projects are, who will be the benefits, if it's a state-developed or state-sponsored project. But there are grants that could be applying to projects that will reduce the equity needs. Of course, financing under very good conditions. These banks or these entities having a very low capital cost, the conditions are that they can offer are very good, very competitive. Also, they can participate in some cases with equity, not just financing, but also part of the equity, being part at some time partners of the developer. And very important, and something that I believe that it's also a great opportunity or a great product by these agencies, are the guarantees schemes. For example, if a energy supply project is going for merchant, where you do not have a fixed PPA or a fixed price on the long term or a fixed contract that will secure the project revenue, these agencies, after a project evaluation, are able to give some guarantees that makes these projects more bankable or easier to finance or easier to attract external financing or external equity. This, I believe, it's one of this great help from these agencies that promote or that incentivize this kind of projects, reducing the risks. So it's quite important or quite beneficial for these opportunities in the energy sector to be close to a multilateral agency or international bank. Their processes are not the fastest, of course. Their due diligence processes are quite, if not complex, yes, detailed, but they have a lot of experience. They have done a lot of projects all over the world. They have a quite objective point of view, quite objective view of the project. So they tend to help a lot. Sometimes when we see something that we don't believe that it's a very large project that will be attract a lot of attention from this agents will not be attracted, but it's the contrary. They are there to help promote these projects, to help benefit the countries, and of course, in the case of renewable energy, they are very focused on decarbonization, the reduced emissions, all the benefits that comes from the renewable energy sector. So it's quite important to get close to them, talk to them, to know more about the programs that are quite interesting and beneficial. And most important or very important is that they can help make the projects much more attractive to the sponsors or investors or even the customers. There are huge opportunities in this sector. There are a lot of alternatives to finance. There are a lot of alternatives to develop the project. There's the technology is changing a lot for the good. The costs are coming down in a very impressive way. I remember 15 years ago, thinking about solar was maybe with some subsidies or grants could be competitive. Right now, the prices, the costs of solar energy have come really, really low, in many times even lower than natural gas, even at low prices that we have in North America. Right now in Europe can be different, but it's impressive what has been done. Energy storage 3 years ago or 4 years ago was not completely the best alternative in terms of cost. Right now, how the costs are coming down, maybe 60 or 70% in the capital expenditure capex of the energy storage are completely viable. So there's, going back to this webinar specifically in opportunities in the renewable energy sector and how to finance, I believe this is the right moment to be here. So,
Alfredo, sorry to
yes?
interrupt you. Just if you don't mind, I can give you a quick summarize of our presentation, and then we can left 10 to 30 minutes to questions because we are running out of time. Just very, very quickly, I would like to emphasize that the more tangible opportunity could be probably the distributed energy in the case of solar energy in roofs, like it could be the case of houses, factories, companies, hotels, and maybe that is the more tangible and the more feasible projects that you can start to develop right now. Thereafter, you can move to some other kind of project with a more bigger scale, but also a small scale solar energy projects and wind projects could be feasible at this time. And maybe Upside could help in the process to present to multilateral agencies a package of projects or initiative in some specific terms or some specific regions, not just of Nigeria, in some other countries, if it's okay for the sponsors of these projects. Basically, that's what I would like to emphasize. The more tangible projects are small scale solar projects or wind energy projects in roofs or in the case of houses, factories, hotels, and Upside could help in the process presenting a package of projects with all the financial support and the technical support to present to multilateral agencies. And with that in mind, we open the session to questions.
Okay, thank you Thank you very much, Hector, Enrique, and Alfredo. It was a wonderful session. I think a couple of people were complaining that they were not hearing some part of the session because of, I think, network issues. So I don't know whether there is a presentation slide that we can share with them so that they follow up with the presentation.
Yes, we can. We apologize for that. We haven't prepared a formal presentation. Well, the following week we can send a presentation to support our thoughts, our ideas that we share today.
Yeah, we can also share a corporate presentation so that you get the basics about Upside and what are our projects, etc. That I can share with you, not a problem.
Okay. Thank you very much. We'll be expecting that. So, some of the questions we have here. So, everyone, if you have questions for our guest speakers, you can send them in now. I've gotten a couple of questions. So, number one question that I got here is, um, can we have access to a list of organizations you think can fund um, energy startups? Like, do you have a list, or maybe can you list some of the organizations you think that can fund energy startups?
Yes, we can send a list thereafter, but as Alfredo mentioned, there are a number of them: the International Finance Corporation, the World Bank, the African Development Bank, which is probably the most close player to you guys. But there are also plenty of private funds, not just multilateral organizations, private funds that promote the development of renewable energy in emerging countries using a mix of private funds or from governments or NGOs that they channel this money to countries like Nigeria or some other African countries. No, bear in mind that there is not just the multilateral organizations, but also there are some specific funds that promote are sponsors of this kind of projects and at global level.
Okay. So, thank you very much. So, we'll be expecting the list. Then the second question is, does Upside help in directly securing funds for any startups?
No, we haven't so far. We could, looking forward, if there is a startup portfolio, an attractive portfolio of opportunities that we can help develop, I think we will be more than glad to evaluate and put the equity into the startup so that we can grow together. But that is in our business plan. That is next year and the year after. That we're going to look for junior developers with an interesting portfolio that we can form a joint venture with, or enter into the equity structure with some participation.
Okay. Thank you for your response. Then the last question here, looking at the uniqueness of Africa, what are specific energy projects that you think are workable, looking at the uniqueness of the African market? What are the kind of energy projects that you think can work in Africa?
Well, I can give you a first glance answer, and I'm sure that my colleagues could elaborate a little bit more with some other ideas. But clearly, due to the specifics of the urbanization of Africa and the isolated parts of Africa, I think that the clear opportunities in the case of distributed energy which means that it's off the grid energy, that you don't need all the grid to transport the energy from a dam 100 kilometers away from the house. And in this case, you install a solar panel in the roof of a house, of a farm, or in the roof of the farm, or a small windmill, and you can produce energy in a standalone basis. And clearly, for me, in my opinion, is the more clear or more tangible opportunity at the African level. But Enrique and Alfredo could elaborate a little bit more about these potential opportunities.
Well, I tend to agree. The problem is the infrastructure. You need construction infrastructure throughout the country and the continent, and that takes time to build. And it's happened in every country where we are active. It happened in Brazil, it happened in Colombia, it happened in Spain, that the existing transmission grid gets saturated very fast, and then there's no capacity to connect new projects. So what seems like the easiest, fastest way to get started is distributed generation. Self-consumption schemes, distributed generation. That is what will, I believe, that's where the market opportunities are.
Okay, distributed generation. Okay, so on a larger scale, the kind of projects that we found there, like the kind of solar projects that we found there, they are majorly used for smaller consumption, more like just maybe the bulbs, like the lights, the computers, and all. We've not really had a bigger source of solar power, maybe trying to power maybe the whole of the building, or powering something like a high consumption equipment here. I don't know if I'm making sense. Like, I don't know whether it's there's a different way it's done in Europe and other countries versus the kind of solar that we have here. What do you think would be the cause?
Well, it depends, Pascal. It depends what is the size of the distributed generation, how complex it is. If you are benefiting from other sources of energy, what is the load curve that you are trying to fulfill? You might need batteries or not, etc. So it costs more than a large scale project per megawatt. But also normally the value of that energy is also higher. So in most cases it offers an opportunity to create value. It's a good rate of return if you design it properly and you structure it properly. I think Alfredo is very experienced on batteries and distributed generation. He can offer a perspective regarding capex, updated capex. Thank you.
Look, as Enrique says, it all depends on the project size, but the costs are coming down very quick, not just for solar, but also for batteries and for an off-grid system. Of course, batteries will be required. We're looking at prices below on a long-term scheme, you can see prices between of the electricity under the I'm sorry, I'm thinking in pesos, but it's about maybe less than $80 per megawatt. But it all depends. But prices of capex prices have come down very fast. So having the solar plus storage to be off grid can be competitive to normal prices.
Okay, okay, okay. Thank
But
you
what
very much.
you can bear in mind, just to finalize, is that depending on the size of the project and its utility scale solar projects, nowadays the capex, the cost per megawatt, is around 650,000 euros, and smaller projects in Europe probably are close to 800,000 euros per megawatt. But obviously, in the case of a small scale projects, we are not talking about 1 megawatt projects. We are talking about smaller projects. But just bear in mind that utility scale projects in Europe are close to 650,000, 700,000, and smaller projects are close to 800,000, 750,000, more or less.
Okay, thank you very much for the input, Hector. So I think there is a question from the audience, from Maurice. So he said, "We have drought." I think he's from Zambia. We have drought. We usually experience rains, but this year we're already experiencing 8-hour load shedding. Renewable energy projects are needed to mitigate the situation. How can we be helped to, I think, to use solar?
Well, it's a matter of diversification. If you just have hydro projects and you experience a dry, like in this case, the risks are higher. But if you, as far as you diversify the source of energy, you reduce the risk of energy shortage. If you have solar, wind, hydro, and gas production, you diversify the risk, and clearly, as more diversified is the system, the less is the risk of shortage.
Okay. Thank you very much, Hector. Thank you very much, Alfredo. Thank you very much, Enrique,
Thank
for
you very much.
the knowledge and experiences shared today. We really appreciate. So everyone, if you are not able to ask your questions, you are free to send in your questions later, or you can reach out to the speakers. I hope they are free to reach out to you on LinkedIn.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you. Yeah, sure.
So you can, so for someone in Zambia that is asking about solar energy, so you are free to personally reach out to the speakers to continue the conversation through LinkedIn. Once again, thank you for creating out time for coming out for this session, everyone, and to the speakers too. Thank you very much for creating out time out of your busy schedules to be here. Thank you, and do enjoy the rest of the weekend. Bye, everyone.
Thank
Thank you
you.
very
It's
much.
Bye.
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 Bye.